Ibrahim alayhi salam. And I wanted to actually stick for a moment with what precedes Surah Yusuf and Surah Hud, and then a common denominator that you find between these three people, between the great-grandfather, the grandson, and the great-grandson. You know, when we talk about Ibrahim alayhi salam as Abul Anbiya, as the father of the prophets, obviously that refers to the creed, the pure tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Ibrahim alayhi salam taught, and how that was transferred from generation to generation. But there's also the akhlaq of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the character traits of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And as you're reading about the twists and turns and the difficulties of Yaqub alayhi salam and Yusuf alayhi salam and how they're dealing with people, it's important to actually appreciate for a moment that there is a method to the way that they are dealing with these things. There's a methodology here, there's a manhaj. And that methodology comes from the great-grandfather, in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, the great-grandfather Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now here's something I want you to pay attention to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in these two surahs about how each one of them dealt with their emotions. So there's a question that I'll ask and I won't answer it right now. Is it good to suppress your emotions? Is it healthy to suppress your emotions? Yes or no? All the men said yes, all the women said no. Exactly what I thought would happen, right? Pay attention, subhanAllah, to something very beautiful about these three men. All three of them, within the capacity of these two surahs, and we often talk about, you know, a hot temper being transitioned from one to the next. But here you have a beautiful khuluq, a beautiful characteristic transition from one to the next. All three of them dealt with pain that was caused to them by one of their family members or some of their family members. In the case of Ibrahim alayhi salam, he complains to Allah about the pain caused to him by who? His father. In the case of Yaqub alayhi salam, he complains about who? His sons. In the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, who? His brothers, right? So the parent, the child, the sibling. And the method here that you have in Surah Hud, and remember that Yaqub lived to see his grandfather Ibrahim. And there's a beautiful lesson that transitions here. Allah describes Ibrahim alayhi salam with Inna Ibrahim lahalimun awwahun munib. It's one of the most beautiful summaries of a man's character alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam was halim, he was very forbearing. He had to take a lot. He had to deal with a lot. The types of things that Ibrahim alayhi salam went through, the types of pain that he encountered, the types of hardships that were inflicted upon him by the same people that are supposed to give you comfort and love were so much. The pain from his people, the pain from all circles and sectors of his society. When he's thrown into that fire and Ibrahim looks around, he doesn't have a friend amongst the human beings. His only supporter is his wife Sarah. Lut alayhi salam has already moved on before that. So he's looking around and he sees nothing but insult and hatred and pain being inflicted upon him. Halim. He has to take a lot. But he was awwah. Allah describes him as someone who grieves, right? So we're talking about the intensity of emotion in the khutbah. He had a lot inside. He had a soft heart. SubhanAllah, this is of the mission of the prophets. They are a mercy in their prophethood. And the Prophet ﷺ, the last and final prophet, is rahmatan lil alameen, a mercy to the world. لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ. It hurts him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What is said to him, and then the fate of those that are saying these things to him. It hurts him. They have soft hearts. They are the softest hearted of people to ever walk the face of the earth, because the softer your heart, the greater your rank in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Ibrahim alayhi salam used to take a lot from the people, and he had a tender heart. He was awwah. So how does he deal with that? He's munib. He's turned back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, frequently turning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like if I could give you a visual of this ayah, think about the first part, lahalimun. You imagine the people hurting him, yelling at him, and his ability to be patient with that. Awwah, when he's all alone and he is grieving and he is crying and he is feeling the pain of what is being done. Munib, turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and funneling all of that into his ibadah, into his dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, into his supplication, into his prayer, into his worship. There's a method here. And you could see in Yaqub alayhi salam that he's halimun awahun munib. And you could see in Yusuf alayhi salam that he's halimun awahun munib. All three of those characteristics are demonstrated in their story. In the case of Yaqub alayhi salam, you have to be extremely forbearing to be able to deal with the pain that is being caused to you by your sons. He's taking a lot from them. Not just that they kidnapped his son and threw him away, but that they also lied to him and they're mocking him in his pain and calling him a deluded old man, a delusional old man. Why can't you get over it? And what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? That وَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزُنِ فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. He cried himself blind. إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Crying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, awah, but إِلَى اللَّهِ, munib. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. He swallowed it. He swallowed it, right? وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ. Those that swallow their pain. He swallowed his emotions, his pain, and he took it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you see the element of forbearing, grieving, turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Forbearing, grieving, turn back to Allah. Now it's very interesting because then you come to Yusuf alayhi salam, the last one in this equation, in this sequence. Ishaq alayhi salam, we don't see any pain being caused to him in the Quran, right? But Allah knows the life of a Nabi always comes with its challenges, right? The life of a prophet always comes with its challenges. But Yusuf alayhi salam, when Yusuf's in front of his brothers and he is in a position of power and they don't know who he is, and they say, in Yasriq, if he steals, right? If he stole, meaning Binyamin, then he had a brother that stole before, just like him, meaning they insulted Yusuf alayhi salam, not realizing they were standing right in front of him. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about Yusuf alayhi salam? فَأَسَرَّهَا يُوسُفُ فِي نَفْسِهِ. Yusuf swallowed it to himself. Like that burned, stings. And he said, قَالَ أَنْتُمْ شَرٌّ مَكَانًا. That you are in an evil place.